little bit about tonight's kind of agenda, the information we're sharing with you today is Alex is going to be talking a lot about the tsunami risk in the area, going over those maps and models, I believe, some cool simulations to share with you as well for the Port of Bellingham. And then I'll talk a little bit more about what those, kind of expand on that, what those hazards look like, and what your response actions should be depending where you are, on your boat, on land. And then we'll be followed up with John Garnett, which is going to be talking a little bit more about the Whatcom County Tsunami Response Plan. So that's kind of the agenda for here tonight. I think we're about 2 hours is our goal. Of course, feel free to ask questions. We'll probably hold some questions until the end, but as they come up, we can go with that too. So we're all here. So I'll go ahead and you can take it away, Alex.
So good evening, everyone. As Dr. said, my name is Alex Colchi-Mascolo, and I am a tsunami geoscientist for the Washington Survey. And today I'm here to talk about the tsunami hazards for Whatcom County. And I'm gonna, before I get into some of the specific hazards for here, I'm gonna go with kind of a general overview of the tsunami science that we currently know about for Cascadia, and then I'll get into some of our map products specifically for Bellingham and Whatcom County. So I just wanted to start with this one image of the tectonic overview of Washington. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we are an earthquake country, and we have actually the second highest risk of earthquakes in the United States, behind California, and that's largely because of this Cascadia subduction zone offshore. So about 70 miles west of the Pacific shoreline, we have this zone where we have an oceanic plate which is cold and dense, and it's being pushed and pulled underneath the continental plate. And when that happens over time, as that plate is sliding beneath the land plate, you have a lot of stress building up, and eventually that stress is going to strain and it's going to rupture and make a big earthquake about a magnitude 9.0 in size. And we've seen that elsewhere in the Pacific Basin, such as in Japan in 2011 or Indonesia in 2004. Those are the last kind of major ones. And Chile also had a couple that were magnitude 8s to 9s in the last decade or so as well. And so for the Cascadia subduction zone, that rupture, that big magnitude 9 earthquake occurs about every 300 years or so. On this map, we say every 200, 600 years. It isn't an average, it's a range. It could happen anytime within that window. And the last time it's happened was in January 26th in the year 1700. And I'll talk more about the Cascadia subduction zone in the next slide. Before I get to that, I want to just talk about other types of earthquakes that Washington is also susceptible to. One of those being deep earthquakes on that downgoing oceanic plate, the Juan de Fuca plate. And it's a little hard to see. I don't know if my mouse will show up on the screen. These occur down here, so you get that downgoing plate right here. And where these dots are, is where you can also have about a magnitude 6 to magnitude 7 earthquake. And that is actually the most common earthquake that Washington faces. And the last time that happened was in 2001, and it was called the Nisqually earthquake, if anyone has heard about that one. And so those are much smaller in size. They're also much deeper, so there's less of a surface effect, but they can still cause localized landslides, liquefaction, and things like that. And that just is occurring because of that downgoing slab. It's releasing that stress deeper in the subduction zone, but not necessarily offshore, where the main lock zone is, where the Cascadia plates are subducting. And then finally, we have many tussle faults that are going across Puget Sound, and those can also are very shallow, and they can also cause tsunamis when they rupture underwater. And those are about a magnitude 7 or so at its maximum. And we actually don't have a great recurrence on those. The last time one of those big earthquakes happened was the Seattle fault that we believe. That was in the year 925 AD, so about 1100 years ago. And there's a lot of science that still needs to be hashed out with some of those crustal faults, but they are still a hazard. And for this presentation, I'm not going to really be talking about much of that. At the state level, we've only mapped the Seattle fault and the Tacoma fault, and they don't really impact Bellingham and Whatcom County that much. But there are other faults that are potentially closer that we just don't know much about, and we hope to in the next couple of years. So with that being said, I will come back to the Cascadia subduction zone. On this image on the right, it's the western margin of the United States and Canada, and we have that The last great earthquake was 322 years ago, so we're within that average of this earthquake. And we believe today that there's a 10 to 25% chance that this cascaded subduction zone will rupture over the next 50 years. And that rupture will be very large. It will have about a magnitude 8 to 9, even maybe greater than 9. And shaking can last for 3 to 6 minutes. So this is a very significant, scary event in terms of its overall magnitude. And then a major tsunami will be following that earthquake because it's rupturing the ocean floor, pushing that water up and towards the United States. And if that tsunami will hit the push on the outer coast within about 10 minutes, and then it will also travel through the strait, along the strait of Georgia, and get to Whatcom County in about 2 hours. So I have a simulation video that will kind of show what that looks like. And then also following that main earthquake event, there's also the chance of aftershocks to occur. And those aftershocks could be in the order of magnitude 7s or even 8s, and that could also cause a tsunami. So it's not just that one single event. It is possible that this could be going on for weeks to years after that main shock as well. It's something to be aware of. Okay, so transitioning to tsunamis. Tsunamis are very fast, they're very powerful waves, and they're also multiple waves. It's not just a single wave, it's a long waveform when they get generated, and they occur unexpectedly, usually with an earthquake or a landslide going into water. In the open ocean, tsunamis move very fast and are largely undetectable from the surface, where you can kind of see in this upper right image. In the open ocean, they're going about 500 miles an hour, about as fast as a jet plane. And then as they move closer and closer to shore, although the speed decreases, the wave heights, the amplitudes increase. And that's the hazard here. And that's largely because these are not your traditional wind waves that just affect the surface of the water. It is the whole water column that is being kind of deformed and ruptured, and then you have the whole water column moving towards the land, and it's almost like a wall of water that is inundating the land. So this is one of my favorite kind of images and stories. So we know a lot about about tsunamis that they've occurred in the past, especially in Washington, because we can go out on the beach, we can dig a hole or look at a cut of a riverbank or in a tidal marsh, and we can see this evidence of tsunamis, marine sand, clean marine sand, in what looks like mud deposits. And this marine sand is different. And you can actually look at the organic material above and below where those sand layers are deposited on the land, and you can see, you can age date them with the radiocarbon inside of them. And you can actually tell when that sand was put there by constraining what happened after it, what happened before it. So in the last 3,500 years, this is off a tidal marsh on the Columbia River. It's a little hard to see in black and white, but where those yellow triangles are pointing, those are layers of sand that are not local to that environment. Those are from the ocean. And with the radiocarbon dating of the organic material, we know when that happened. So we know in the last 3,500 years, at least at that site, this large tsunami has happened 6 times in that time period there. And we have evidence all over the coastline like that. So those orange dots are showing all these different places where geologists, tsunami scientists have gone out, put a core in the ground or looked at it on the side of the hut bank, and were able to see evidence of this tsunami. One of the best spots is at Discovery Bay. This is on the northeast corner of the Olympic Peninsula at Port Townsend. This is what it kind of looks like. So you have Discovery Bay is right there. You can kind of dig a hole, and you can look at the layers of sand and dirt right there in front of you. And that's what a pit would look like if you dug a pit down there. And you can see so distinctly, you have these layers of mud. And then in between the mud, you have those really tan, kind of clean sand layers. And based off of the organic materials, you can then figure out when that sand was deposited. So at Discovery Bay, just in this picture, you can see 4 different tsunami events. But if you keep digging down, there's actually 9 tsunami events that have been recorded at Discovery Bay. I won't get too much into this figure, but just like on land, we also have the same record offshore. You can take a boat and some coring equipment and drill a core into the ocean floor, and you can kind of get the same record of deposits. And that's because when you have a wave that comes in, it also brings sediment and sand out down the front of the shelf, and it deposits on the abyssal plain of the sea floor. And there's been many coring expeditions out there as well from universities that have looked at sort of the same deposits on land. They're also offshore. And when we compile all that data together, the onshore and offshore data, we're able to know that in the last 10,000 years, that's what this calendar is showing. So on the left side, we have 8,000 BC when the first wine was made, all the way until present day here. On the right side, there's been about 41 earthquakes in the last 10,000 years. So on average, that's every 273 years, the Cascadia earthquake has had a rupture. So, and the different widths of the bars are showing different size earthquakes. So the thicker lines are what we estimate to be magnitude 9s, the skinnier ones are magnitude 8s. And you can see all the way on the right, we're kind of in a gap right now. We had what we think the last 1700 event was probably about a magnitude 8 to 9.1. That's the estimate that we think. And we haven't had anything since. But you can see how cyclical these bars are, and that we are in that zone of when it could happen again. And we have the benefit right now to learn from history. We have not experienced an earthquake here in a very long time. We're lucky in that sense. Whereas in Japan, 2011, they had a big major earthquake and tsunami. It was magnitude 9.1, and the tsunami wave was 125 feet in some places. And there was an estimated 20,000 people either deceased or missing from that event, and over 500,000 people were forced to evacuate and leave their homes. And that event was a major economic cost as well, about $235 billion, and it was the world's most costliest event. And right now, we are trying to prevent numbers like that. So all the work that we're doing here with Dante, emergency management, and Whatcom County, we're trying to sort of mitigate and prevent and bring awareness and education to the communities, so we are aware of those numbers and this type of hazard. Even though they're very kind of low occurrence, they're very high risk. And that's kind of what we're here today kind of doing. And then similarly in 2004, the Indian Ocean had a big 9.1 earthquake, and that event killed over 200,000 people. So these are very, very catastrophic events when they do occur. And that leads me to some of the products that we make to help bring some of that education and awareness to people like you here today. So we have our inundation maps, which show the extent of flooding over the land. We also have current speed maps for offshores, which can be useful for the maritime communities, boaters, shippers, anything, recreation people, anyone that's in the water. Those are very relevant to them. We also have evacuation walk time maps, and I'll show an example of that from Bellingham. And I believe they're on the table outside as well. You can take one of those home with you today. And we also have the tsunami simulation videos, which kind of visualize what a tsunami could look like in kind of that visual perspective, which I think helps a lot of people. So I'll start with that video. This is the statewide video from that magnitude 9.0 earthquake in the Cascadia subduction zone. So here we have our wave peaks in the warm red colors. The wave troughs are in that cool blue colors. We have the earthquake time on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. This video has been sped up to show, I think, 8 hours in about 2 minutes. So this is going to show the wave coming in much faster than it really would, but it's just for simulation purposes. We cut off our model just at the straight. So we have extended that model for the maps, but just for the simulation purposes, this is the model that was run. So we have a magnitude 9 earthquake occurring. You can see right away, it hits the outer crust very, very fast, under 20 minutes. And that first wave front is coming in right now through the Strait of Juan Fuca. And it hits Whidbey Island, and it splits. Half the wave goes up north in the Strait of Georgia, the other half goes down to Puget Sound. You can see here, it reaches kind of Bellingham Bay, Whatcom County in about 2 hours, give or take, plus or minus 10 minutes or so. You can see still on the outer coast, there's massive waves occurring even 3 hours after the event. You have some waves bouncing around the San Juan Islands right now. And you have multiple peaks and depressions during this event. just let this play out, and then I'll move on to another video, which will be focused on Bellingham Bay. Oh, before I get to those videos, this is just a summary table. It's probably a little hard to read from where you guys are sitting, but for the tide gauges that are in Bellingham Bay, Bellingham, Cherry Point, the wave arrival is in one of those columns, which is showing about 2 hours for Cherry Point, 2 hours 15 minutes for Bellingham. Bellingham is 2 hours 10 minutes for the first wave arrival, and the approximate maximum offshore amplitude is posted as well, and it's about 10 feet, maybe 13 feet for Bellingham, but 10 feet for Bellingham, and 7 feet for Cherry Point is what we have estimated for offshore amplitudes. And that doesn't necessarily mean flow depth for onshore flooding, that's just the weight in the water. So that could amplify a little bit more when that actually gets onto land as well. So here is the video for Bellingham Bay. This is the wave amplitude video. And you have that magnitude 9 earthquake beginning. Notice how the wave leads with that blue depressional wave. That's going to be the water being drawn out of the bay before that wave rises. That's a natural warning sign that if you see water being drawn out from the bay or harbor, that's a sign that a tsunami is imminent and approaching. So you see the water is drawn out first in Bellingham, and then that wave comes in. And you can see how it floods in the port up on that's the Nooksack River, I believe, and then along the island, you have a couple places there as well. And Sand Point isn't being shown on the top left part of the map, but that also gets inundated pretty heavily, and I have a map to show that as well. But you can see how this kind of the port of Bellingham area in this video does have some quite significant inundation there. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next video, which is current speeds. This is going to be an introduction for current speeds. So we are recording our speeds in knots. And anything kind of greater than like the 6 to 9 plus knot range can be very damaging to port infrastructure. So that's that purple color, that kind of dark, deep purple color. And the lighter colors are kind of more that beige, kind of white, tan color that we see. Again, this video has been sped up about 300 times normal. And this again is focused on Bellingham Bay. So here we have our Cascadia earthquake beginning. We don't have the video showing the wave come in, but you can see well before the 2 hour mark. It's a little hard to see on this screen because of the colors, but you can kind of see now there's a wave that kind of is coming in at 1 hour before the actual tsunami comes in with the current speeds ramping up. You can kind of see it a little bit, and you can see the water drawing out from the shore in the north. And then you see the wave come in. So, and we have these videos online as well if you want to see them with kind of full saturation of the colors. It's a little hard to see on this screen, but you can see, if you squint a little bit, you can see some of the whirlpools that form, and just kind of how fast these currents are around the shorelines and different topographic points and features within Bellingham Bay.
And you said that goes all the way up to Blaine?
It does, and I have my next couple slides are going to show all of Whatcom County, the tsunami inundation maps and current speed maps that we have published. So I'll skip to that right now. The color is not great, but those kind of deep blues that are showing up on land, you can kind of, it kind of all blends in right now on this screen, but it's about a like 10 to 20 foot wave, kind of those blue colors that are showing inundation here, even on Eliza Island on the southern portion. So to orient us, we have Bellingham Bay on the right, and then we have north of Bellingham on the left of this map. So Blaine's all the way at the top with the semi kind of spit right there. And you can see in Birch Bay, there's some inundation occurring too. I'll just point, it's a little hard to see in this section right here in Birch Bay, and then also Birch Bay Village up here. You get some inundation. And these are published maps online on the Washington DNR website, dnr.law.gov. I can write that down for people later if they haven't seen these maps and look with better colors. I apologize for the word saturation right now, but we also have the current speed maps, and same thing, you have very fast currents going through these narrow inlets and topographic, kind of around topographic points. You can see up by Blaine into Drayton Harbor. There's some fast currents right at that entrance. And then also going around Lummi Island, Eliza Island, and these kind of narrow passages and things like that. Yes?
Are the heights and speeds you're talking about indicative or caused because of the shallow depth of water in those areas, or what?
Yeah, so
Mudflats.
in general, yeah, when you have more shallow water.
High things going up there in that mud flat.
Right, so
And you got faster moving water in this stuff.
yeah, and it's largely because it is shallow, and when you have less water, the tsunami will move faster. So typically with the maximum current speeds, you actually get faster speeds. It would occur in low water as opposed to in high water. But you have greater inundation and overall extent of the tsunami when it's in high water conditions. So that then brings me to the evacuation walk time modeling that we have done. And many people ask, why do we do walk times and not, transportation drive times and things like that? And that's largely because we believe that many coastal areas will likely not be drivable after an earthquake of this magnitude. You can have downed power lines, liquefaction in the roadways, and other different hazards that we are unaware of right now. So we've been creating throughout the state these walk time maps, and we've done it for 15 communities so far. And this has also helped us kind of delineate where vertical evacuation structures may be necessary in our state. And we've done this with some really cool evacuation modeling tools from GIS, and then we've used Illustrator and Photoshop to make our map products. And this is what it looks like for Bellingham, and these are the ones that are printed out on the table over there. So we have over there, I think it's broken up between North Bellingham and South Bellingham. I think Fairhaven's on the south map, and then Bellingham, the port area on that north map. And we have these arrows that show how to walk out of the hazard zone, and the colors that are showing on the map is the time it takes to walk out of those zones. So this has nothing to do with wave arrival or anything like that. But keep in mind that from Cascadia, we do model about 2-hour wave arrival, and it looks like on this map, the farthest or the most amount of time it takes to leave the hazard zone is about 30 minutes. So that's really good shape actually, and it's much better than other parts of the state which have less time to evacuate and a faster tsunami arrival time. So Bellingham is in good shape because of that, but there's also the hazard that if there was potentially a local landslide that would have occurred in Bellingham Bay, the arrival time of the tsunami could be much faster than 2 hours, what we say here. So keep that in mind too. It's best to get out of the inundation zone as fast as possible and to your ability, regardless of the posted tsunami arrival time. You just never know if there's going to be a local landslide or some other hazard that could happen. And then if you want to see all of our tsunami data, we have a geological information portal online. You can just search Washington Geology Portal on Google and this will come up. Or you can visit the dnr.law.gov/geology portal and you can also find it that way. This is a really cool tool because you can there's schools, where there's buildings of interest, where you have friends that live, and you can zoom in on those neighborhoods and you can print out your own maps in that sense. So you can kind of see a more zoomed in map that we might not show at the state level. So this is a really cool tool for the community in that sense. And it's also not just tsunamis, it also shows zones of liquefaction from earthquakes, as well as other hazards too, such as landslides, or susceptible landslide slopes and things like that too. So there's many different geological hazards and tools you can toggle on that kind of table of contents thing, and then you can print out your own maps. And then I'm not going to talk too much about the mitigation and strategy for kind of the maritime community, because we just had this report that came out last couple of years. I know Dante's going to talk a lot about this when he speaks. But I'll just talk a little bit about the models that we did for this project. So we were using a very high resolution modeling for these maps I'm about to show, higher than what we've published in the past. So it's about a 3-meter resolution. So everything that we're seeing here, the width of the model is about 3 meters every cell, which is really, really high, way better than most of the state has. And this is also a maritime focus, so we have products in this report that are not anywhere else, like a drawdown map to see how much water gets drawn out and things like that. And we also showed multiple scenarios. So I'll just flip to the first map. We have the Cascade zone, which I've been talking about a lot, but also a maximum considered Alaska earthquake and tsunami event, which is not published anywhere else in the state yet. So Bellingham was actually the first area to have an Alaska max scenario published. And you can see even a large earthquake from Alaska, similar to 1964, could cause some significant inundation in the port area as well. And that's a whole other hazard where we would be receiving alerts. You wouldn't feel that earthquake, but there would be alerts that get distributed that being an earthquake happening up in the Alaska Aleutian zone. Arrival time is about, I think, 5 hours, around 5 hours for it to get to Bellingham from that type of event. But that's something that is included in this report, and Dante can talk more about kind of the differences and what to do there. So we also did it for the Fairhaven region as well. And then we also, same 2 areas, we have Bellingham and then also Fairhaven for current speeds, and just showing that maximum current speeds. And that high resolution modeling really comes into play if you want to model the currents coming in and out of the harbor entrances, such as Swallowing Harbor, and down by the Fairhaven station as well. You can see how the currents really ramp up, going right into those entrances in and around those breakwaters. And here is the Fairhaven map, a little hard to see. It's all on that port. And then we have a maximum drawdown map that I was alluding to. And this is showing how much water gets drawn out before that tsunami wave arrives. So it's not white on the real map, but on this screen it's white. It actually helps. So everything that's white is showing dry land. So all that water could get pulled out of the bay. From Cascadia, it's pretty significant. From Alaska, it's still significant, but not as much. And the contours on the blues that are going kind of towards the southwest is every 3 feet. So it's 0 to 3 feet in the white until about 20 feet in the dark blue of water depth, which is a really cool product. And this is the first community that we have done a product like this for. Yes?
So is that diagram on the left basically showing the Swallowing Harbor will go dry?
Yes. Before the big kind of cresting wave from Cascadia comes, the water will be pulled out, and that is a warning sign. If you see that happening pretty close to the you should get out of that area. This is it for Fairhaven. Fairhaven is much more deep water than Bellingham Bay, so it's not as significant here, but you can kind of see a little bit of draw out near the ferry system, the ferry that goes to, I think it's Richmond yet. I'm not entirely sure. So this is just my last slide, and it's just something, if you know your hazard, what we preach here is education and outreach and just being aware of these types of events. And you can survive it, you can recover from it, but we need to know what it all as community members could then share with your friends and family as well. And with that, I have my email up here. I can also talk to whoever afterwards and give it to them. But I will pass it over to Dante, unless there's any specific questions on that tsunami hazard. Yes.
So your models think, well, how do you know how high the wave was in 1700?
Where?
Here at Bellingham Bay.
We don't know exactly how high it was because we didn't have any instrumentation set up at that time here in our model. So we're actually modeling an event larger than 1700. We believe this is our kind of maximum considered scenario that we're showing in these models. So I don't have a great idea of the 1700. I know we modeled in the past, I just don't have that number off the top of my head.
But you're thinking maximum wave height.
Probably around 10 feet, 10 to 15 feet is what I would guess. Offshore, and then onshore it's a whole different scenario because you have topographic effects that could channelize water. It's not a directly linear relationship between the offshore and onshore.
But you don't have any inkling that it would be like 50 or 100 feet or...
Over here, no. Not unless there was a localized landslide that would trigger an earthquake. But from the earthquake generated wave here, probably it wouldn't be more. It would probably be in the 10 to 15 feet range is what the maximum is. Yeah.
Alex, can you please say a word, if possible, about the evidence from Japan of the 1700 subduction quake?
Yeah, sure. So in Japan, so we know that the 1700, the last cascading earthquake occurred in 1700, and more specifically, January 26th of 1700, because that record, or that wave of tsunami was reported 9 hours later in Japan. And that's part of the whole idea of how the tsunami can travel 500 miles an hour in the open ocean, which is the same speed as a jet plane, because it takes 9 hours for a plane to fly from the United States to Japan. It's the same speed as a tsunami, and they took very, very good records during that time with Japan. It was kind of the samurai era of Japan, and they were very good with the records. And I guess I don't know what else much to say about it, just that we were really able to figure out when it happened, pinpoint an exact day because of the Japanese records.
So, what geologic formations, like is it river deltas where these ridiculously high breaking waves can form, or is it a steep slope, or
Right, so typically in a tsunami it won't be a breaking wave, but if it was going up a river channel, and you had a current coming the other way, kind of against each other, that's when the breaking wave will occur. And yes, it's typically in upriver areas. And I believe in this area, I think even by Blaine, it could be up in like the Dakota Creek, is kind of where you have a breaking wave, because there is some energy that goes up that creek. And the Lummi kind of area, the Nooksack Delta, could have some breaking waves as well. Yeah. Yes?
Sure. It sounds like that Squalakum Harbor is, before the tsunami arrives, completely dry.
Yeah.
And then basically there's like a 10 to 15 feet wave coming into that dry marina. So there's probably nothing that's going to stay.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a very powerful wave that comes in, and I think a lot of the strategy that we've been working on here with the county and the port is some of those efforts to protect some of the infrastructure in the port. I think Dante, you're going to talk about that a little bit.
I'll talk a little bit, but happy to talk more and share.
Yeah.
I have one more question, which is, so I'm a liveaboard, right? So I'm in the marina, so I'm expecting heavy shaking. But do you guys have any data or any idea or model of like the seismic suction that's going to happen? Because you have an enclosed basin filled with water, and if you see videos from swimming pools and earthquakes, the water is going to go out one way and then it's going to go out the other way. And so you get like huge standing waves or something.
So you can explain what that is, too.
Yeah, so he's asking about seismic sation, which is the earthquake kind of wave, not the tsunami wave, but like during the earthquake shaking, you have waves that pass through the ground much, much faster than any tsunami could ever reach. So it's in like 2 minutes of the earthquake, you could have these large kind of oscillating waves that affect enclosed areas or enclosed bays like Bellingham Bay or pools and stuff like that. Lake Washington has had some shaking, and there's been evidence of shaking from, I think Alaska has had earthquakes, and there's been some shaking reporting in Lake Washington. In terms of modeling shaking though, we have nothing concrete. There is a group over in Michigan that is looking at shaking in the Great Lakes, and I actually just emailed that group last month, so we just started talking about the shaking. So I have nothing really to share now, other than that it is a hazard and it's something to be aware about, but in terms of anything kind of concrete, I can't really share anything at this point in time, but I'm hoping in the future to share some of the shaking effects.
Because for me would be the question, do I have actually time to get on the dock and leave, or am I going to get washed off by big waves that's rushing back and forth? So that's kind of my...
Typically the shaking will occur during the earthquake shaking.
Right.
So the best thing to do, I'm not sure if this is the same that you preach for liveaboards, but just drop cover, hold on until the shaking stops, and then once it seems it's safe, make that judgment call, and then you want to leave.
Right.
You kind of head towards inland or higher ground.
I'll probably talk about it. I will talk about it a little bit more, but that is the idea, because if you get off your boat onto the dock during the shaking, you're not going to be able to really move. Because even though you might be on your boat wobbling around on the dock, there's going to be significant shaking for minutes. Potentially for minutes. And then USGS is recently doing studies to share that you're 50% more likely to get injured if you're walking and moving during an earthquake, which kind of reinforces our point. We kind of knew that. But that would be, weight, drop cover, hold on, even in your boat to secure yourself. But then you want to get out and go to high ground for sure. Yeah. Yes.
For localized landslides, do we know what areas are the highest risk in the neighborhood? I would guess like the west side of Long Island and Chuckanut Mountain and Oyster Dome and those the spots.
But it's not good.
It's very hard to model localized landslides at this point in time because we don't know. There's so many uncertainties. On that geology portal, though, there is kind of a landslide susceptibility map that could kind of point into which hill slopes are more stable, less stable, more likely to fail and stuff like that. But in terms of that information, I don't know much more about the landslides. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about undersea landslides?
The submarine landslides,
Yeah,
yes.
the Fraser River bank is...
Yeah. So it's sort of the same same side of deal with the overshore ones. We don't have much information right now of what the chances are if those were to fail or not to fail and cause kind of a submarine landslide called tsunami. Those are possible though, and that's why when you feel the shaking, although we say that the first wave doesn't arrive until about 2 hours, it's best to move as quickly as possible as soon as it's safe to do so, because you never know about those local things that could be going on. And there's so much bluff and so much stuff in Puget Sound, in the Strait of Georgia, just to say the sea in general, there could be a lot of unknown hazards that could increase the timing of any sort of tsunami moves or things like that. And that's part of the equation, and that part is a little more harder to solve than the tsunami or the earthquake generated wave itself. I know there's groups out there that are looking at landslide generated tsunamis, and I know mainly around King County, there's a couple of UW students that are looking in Elliott Bay. I'm not sure if they have anyone up here at that point. And I don't know what the Canada researchers are doing, but I think there's a group up in the University of Victoria that's also looking at maybe the Fraser River hazard as well. And there could be some geologic papers on it, but I'm not sure at this moment. Yeah.
Has there been any work done on the possibility of a lahar coming in a volcanic eruption down the Nooksack, and how that would affect Bellingham Bay?
So I'm sure there have been. Lahar is an earthquake, right? And the USGS is people that monitor the LAHAR systems. So that's at the national level, we're at the state level. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I would imagine the Nooksack is a drainage for the LAHAR. And yes, that I'm not entirely sure what the interaction would be if there would be a LAHAR coming into the bay. That's a great question. I want to actually look into that myself now too. So you know?
So I don't, but I do work with someone that probably does. His name's Brian Turbush. He's the earthquake program coordinator, but he went to school, an earthquake and volcano program coordinator, and he is a volcanologist, so he might have an idea. And I'm happy to, if you find me after, I'll give you a card to connect it to him.
I was under the impression the statute was much higher risk than the Nooksack.
What would be?
That the Skagit River.
Yes, the Skagit River, definitely.
Risk of a lot of, and that more of the Nooksack risk is around.
Okay. Yeah, in terms of the volcano hazard, I'm not sure. And there's also a possibility that volcanic activity could be triggered by a cascading event too. There's some, everything in geology kind of talks to each other. They're not all isolated, so something to be aware of that too. Yes.
As far as the LAHAR and the volcano goes, we did an exercise several years ago. We spent 2 years with the Geological Survey up here studying it, primarily scientists, 4 by Baker. And the extent of the LAHAR flow would be mostly north in Canada, up the Sumas Prairie. That's where it went the last time. As far as the extent down Bellingham Bay, it would be very similar to last year's flood. And the amount of debris that flew down in there. The actual leading edge of the LAHAR is 2 million per day, according to the Geological Survey. And that's basically a collapse of essentially this side of the mountain, which is a fairly low probability, the highest is on the backside.
And maybe related to Skagit risk.
Yep. And Brian was here for this one.
Are there any other questions before I pass it over to Dante? Well, great.
Cool.
Great quiz.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Well, a lot of scary stuff we saw today. So I'm going to probably tell you some more scary stuff, but also tell you some information of how you can prepare over time, and also what to do during.
And that is your cue to drop, cover, and hold on. There's a couple other places you might need them during shaking. You might be at the grocery store, you might be sleeping, you might be driving. So if you're in bed, what you want to do is you stay in bed, hold on to a post of the bed if you can, and then cover your face with a pillow. Because ultimately that moving up, you can actually injure yourself. Most injuries in earthquake casualties come from the moving around during them. Outside, this one's interesting. You want to be very aware of your surroundings. Stay away from buildings, walls, and power poles. I do a little bit of an experiment. I was driving to downtown Bellingham, saw a lot of brick buildings, saw some others. Maybe those are the ones you don't want to necessarily be by. Driving, stop where it's safe. Turn on your hazard lights, stay in the vehicle. If you're in a wheelchair, it's the lock cover on, so put on the brakes and kind of protect your head. And ultimately, no matter where you are, if you're not able to drop cover, if you're not able to hold on to something, you want to try to cover the back of your head. I mean, you don't want anything hitting the back of your head. That would be pretty dangerous. Alex talked a lot about the secondary hazards of earthquakes, and this is what's really important to keep in mind, especially for tsunami risks, because after you have an earthquake, you could potentially have tsunamis, landslides, fires, liquefaction. Liquefaction is really interesting. There's a lot of, if you type it on Google, you see entire buildings kind of sunk into the ground on quicksand, but that's actually what kind of liquefaction. If you ever gone to the beach and tap your hand on the sand a couple of times, and that's actually what a small little localized liquefaction can look like. It kind of looks like quicksand almost. This shows in the top left that exact what the subduction zone can do and how the water, body of water is displaced and it pushes it up. And that column water is traveling on both sides. That's why we had, in 1700, there was tsunami picked up on that side, and then there was tsunami here, and in 2011, we had a distant tsunami here on the west coast. So, the last series of long local waves, we saw that in the simulations. Super powerful. It's like a wall of moving cement, and it's a low probability but very high impact. We talked about local and distant tsunamis, right? So local, gonna feel the earthquake, you're shaking is the primary warning that a tsunami is probably on the way. It'll be less than 3 hours or so until the first wave arrives. And ultimately, like Alex said, even for Cascade subduction zone, it was 2 hours and 15, a little over 2 hours in this area. You might actually, with the severe shaking, you could have landslides that trigger, tsunamis much quicker than that. And the biggest local threat is the Cascade subduction zone. Now, distant tsunamis, we will not feel each. Your alert is going to be your primary warning that a tsunami might be on the way. Much more time to round one of those. Biggest distant threat is Alaska, but it's a much smaller threat in the inner coast. We're learning a lot about the Alaska tsunami from Alex and his team, but ultimately there's a much bigger threat when it comes to our outer coast communities for that, even though there is a threat here. Does anyone know when the last tsunami Washington had was? Anyone want to take a guess?
January 15, 2022?
Yes. We had a tsunami this year. And it was from the Tonga Hapai volcanic eruption off the coast of New Zealand. There was a pressure, like a shock wave that actually crossed the pressure wave from it. And Alex might actually know more about this than me. Do you want to speak anything to that, or not really? You probably know. Yeah, we're learning a lot about it, but it actually, the pressure wave was picked up, and it picked up on tide gauges in Puerto Rico. And there was actually tsunami felt there as well. So I'm not saying the water went over Mexico. It was actually the pressure in the atmosphere that did that. But it was not, no damage reported in Washington. Maybe the wave highest, I think, was maybe a foot or so. But we were in a tsunami advisory for the entire state of Washington, Oregon, California. We did not know a lot about that. But I'll talk a little bit more about alert levels after that. Not going to go over our Cascade subduction zone slide too much because Alex took a look at it, but I do want to show some pictures of what Japan in 2011 looks like for their subduction zone earthquake, the Tohoku earthquake, just some images, just to kind of share what local tsunamis can do, specifically in our outer coast. But I mean, how many of us have seen some of these pictures before, other than today? Maybe some of us, videos. This is very devastating, especially for our maritime community. Like, look, you have a yacht sitting on top of a house there, boats washed on streets, and Japan's topography is really interesting. It's a lot more flat than Washington's, so farther in, but ultimately absolutely devastating for the coast of Japan. This is before and after for one of the communities there. So what do impacts from a local earthquake and tsunami look like? Well, this is such an interesting video from the airport in Japan, showing the tsunami actually going over the tarmac, kind of coming in. This is after 5 to 6 minutes of severe shaking, but what you can expect is a damage to piping systems and pumps, power loss, down power lines, bridges, overpasses, roadways. We know how our infrastructure is rated, at least in general, across the country. And you can expect that most of these bridges will be down, overpasses down, and especially for damage to port marina infrastructure, so thinking about lasting impacts for shipping, supply chains. And in Japan, there was over 2,000 roads that were damaged, 56 bridges, and 28,000 ships and 319 ports were destroyed. This is something, this is what we plan for and what we want to educate folks about, especially in our maritime community, folks living along the coast. So what does that look like? What do the hazards look like in damage for? Oh, didn't realize there was a second video there. Forgot that I put that there. But absolutely devastating. This is why we dropped our hold on and head to high ground immediately. And I'll talk a little bit more specifically here on your boat or near the water there. So for maritime, what can you expect? Drag on large vessels, significant damage. The docks will go through more to pulling them right off of cleats and moorings. Significant debris in water, scour and sedimentation affecting the channels, the way that we know and understand our natural environment and the beds and the seafloor in general are going to change forever, and we're not going to really know for a long time what that's going to look like. Contaminated water and sediments as well. So thinking about petroleum, different fuels, chemicals. If you just think and look around the Port of Bellingham or in ports and marinas in general, think of the things that could be spilled. And that could be in the water, which has significant environmental hazards, and this is why we don't want to be in the water. You don't know what's in floodwaters. We saw also, speaking about flooding, what flooding looked like in this county last November and December. And significantly strong and unpredictable currents in the narrows of harbors. These are two interesting ones. The left is the Japan tsunami in California. Okay? That's, I don't know how many hours later, I guess it was somewhere around 9 or so. But that's a lot. That's just a couple of feet. And that is significant damage to our, in our ports, small vessels and things. And you see some folks that are gathering to look, right, in that video, but this is why you do not want to be even on the water there. That's why for our tsunami advisory in January, we didn't notice significant impacts in our state. We did see those significant impacts, which I'll share in a couple of slides from the Tonga tsunami in California. But yeah, significant water level fluctuations. These are huge whirlpools from the Tohoku earthquake in Japan. This is why I'm here today, to kind of show you a little bit about the hazards, what they look like, depending on where you might be. They can cause significant damage to boats. So this is in Crescent City, California, from the Japan tsunami, traveling all the way across. And this is why tsunami alerts matter, especially for these distant tsunamis. And knowing what to do when you get that alert, how you get the alert, what do you do? And that's it's important to share. So in January, there was the Tonga tsunami, and this is in California. I'm trying to think where that specifically is in California. I think it's Santa Cruz. Okay. So yeah, the volcanic eruption all the way on the other side of the world, New Zealand, causing tsunami here in Washington, California, Oregon. Our tsunami was not looking like this, but that in itself is just a couple of feet. That's actually 3-4 feet kind of territory. I mean, that is something you do not want to be on the water rim or near the water rim. Because significant damage to the infrastructure, about $6.5 million in damage, and in Ventura Harbor, 1 to 2 million. And the community reaction on our coast and a lot of other coasts to the tsunami was 1 to 3 feet. That's nothing. We had people in Westport gathering on the other side, like of the breakwaters, and waiting with cameras, right? So we don't want to do that. 1 to 3 feet, especially if you are a boater. 1 to 3 feet is a lot, right? Which brings me to, I think, one of the most important takeaways from tonight is the actions you take. Response factors for voters to consider. I'm curious how many people own a boat, go boating, live on the water. Oh, great. We have a good audience today for this. You know, and ultimately, you know, there are a lot of things to consider during a tsunami. And it really relies on your skill, the equipment you have, the time, the forward arrival, weather, communication services. You already know when you're on the water, you're already making these decisions, and you are aware, tuning in, you know, keeping track of the weather. You know, it's important to rely on that expertise too, but you want to consider how much time before wave arrival is expected, keeping in mind there might be landslides that are triggered from earthquakes and other things before you're making your decision. Consider the length of time it's going to take to reach a safe location. Preparedness of the vessel, captain and folks that are on board. The weather at sea can be dangerous as a tsunami itself. Tsunamis happen when they want to happen at any time, so it could happen during really bad weather as well. So you have some compounding factors, and you can also expect that during tsunamis there will be congested roads and boat ramps. So I wanted to highlight that this kind of decision tree just in itself, you're already relying on this. But there's two different response kind of categories before you can start making decisions on what you're going to do. The first one is you want to know what your tsunami natural warning signs are. You're going to basically either have a tsunami natural warning sign and or you're going to get alert. But for natural tsunami warning signs, you might see the water behaving a little differently. You're acting abnormal. You know, bubbling, frothing, acting normally. A sudden rise or fall of the ocean, so just like Alex was showing, that receding of that water, that natural warning sign is your sign that there's most likely a tsunami on the way. If you feel a sudden jolt on your vessel, as if you felt like you hit something or you've run aground, that could be a sign that there was an earthquake. So, you know, long, strong ground shaking at the coast. While going from the ocean, these are all now just tsunami warning signs. So what are you going to do with this information? Is you're going to kind of think through the following. Now, what I will say is soon, I'm developing a go-to guide. So you can have it with you, you can kind of take a look to see how you're making the decisions depending on what's going on. But for natural tsunami warning signs, you might be, if you're on land or near the dock, you're going to leave your vessel and head to high ground immediately. If you want to drop cover, hold on, of course, and then head to high ground immediately. You're not going to have time to save your vessel. Please do not do what they do in the movies and what you think and see of people going out to water. At this moment, if you're noticing these natural warning signs, you could potentially die trying to do so. So if you are on land or near the dock, keeping those things in mind. Now, if you're on the water, it really depends where in the water, but if you're on the water, natural warning sign means that it's probably, you might be stuck, might be a little too late. So you want to put on your life vests. Put on life vests. If you have any fishing gear in the water, drop it, because that could drag your boat or vessel under, capsize you, and depending on where you are. Remember, like I said, if you're already out, you might not have enough time to come back. So you can head to the deepest water possible at that point. But you need to consider all of those things that I mentioned, and if you're on the water, you need to keep in mind the following. You need to proceed perpendicular to the shore, sail directly into the wind waves, maintain separation from other vessels, and try to synchronize movements with other vessels. This is a last resort kind of a thing to keep in mind. So that first one, you do, when I say near the dock, if you're on the dock, very close to the dock, keeping that in mind that you do not want to go out. Now, for official tsunami alerts, I broke these up in this way because you're most likely, you may not get an alert once you're seeing some of these natural tsunami warning signs. And we're not really sure, depending on the city you're shaking, that happens, how audible some of our systems might be. Official tsunami alerts are beneficial mostly for our distant tsunami events with a lot of lead time as well. We know that we have tsunami sirens, and we know what they sound like. Actually, I don't know, is the speaker still on? Can we play it? Okay. How many of us have heard the test of the tsunami sirens? Okay, great. And the wailing sound we do once a year on Great Shakeout. How many of us have heard the actual wailing sound of the siren? For those that haven't, I think this is still on. Do you have the ability to play it on your phone? Yeah, you can bring that too. Go around. So, by the way, on October 20th at around 10:20 a.m., we're going to be playing the actual wailing sound of the siren as a test for the Great Washington Shakeout. Please do not call 911 if it's around 10:20 a.m. And know that that is a test. Of course, if you feel shaking, and then you're hearing that still, oh, okay. We'll get the siren on in a minute here. But on October 20th, around 10:20, you're going to hear something like the sound that's about. Here we go. So this is what it sounds like. It's for the test message, yeah.
If you are in a low coastal area, your evacuation route. If this is a real emergency, you should follow evacuation route. Move to higher route.
So this is the test that you're going to be hearing. And this is what you get once a month. This is what you should be familiar with. That's good. Yeah. So, and in here is the actual wailing sound. So if you hear this, and it's not on October 20th at 10:20 a.m., this is what the tsunami sirens sound like. And that's good. Thank you. There's over 120 sirens throughout the state of Washington. I don't know how many are here. 12. There's 12. Now that's one of the ways that you can get alerted that a tsunami is on the way. These go off for tsunami warnings. But there are other ways that you can receive alerts. If you have a phone and you open up your camera and you aim it at that little pixelated box, right now, oh, it's not working. But yeah, the pixelated box there, that's a QR code. It can actually take you right to our website, mil.wa.gov/alerts. Not only on this website does it show information for how to receive tsunami alerts, but we have information for earthquake warning as well, all of your local alerts, and I know we have some local emergency managers and experts here that have information here as well to sign up for local alerts. That's really important. There are a lot of ways that you can receive tsunami alerts. You can download some third-party apps. And if you have a NOAA weather radio, that's a good one to have. NOAA weather radios will broadcast those, including tsunami advisories. But ultimately, these are several of the ways that you can get alerted. Now, if you are receiving, yes?
When these things go off, how far away are you supposed to be able to hear these things?
They have about a mile of range to hear. That's why they're so
I hear this one go off down here and it's...
Yeah, so this is why it's super important. The tsunami sirens is part of a redundant system of alerting, and that's why we want to make sure you have on your phone, you have wireless emergency alerts turned on, you sign up for your local alerts, you have a NOAA weather radio. That's important.
How many people do you think have that?
That's why we're here today. What's good to know is at least how to get alerts on your phone.
Yep.
That's going to be the best thing to do. You can also follow the National Tsunami Warning Center on Twitter or on different social media accounts. If you will, depending on the event, right? You know, thinking about the catastrophic earthquakes that we can have in this area. That's why we want to have multiple systems, and that's why we're having the. That's why we say for knowing your natural warning signs is the best thing for the largest impacts that we can have. Distant ones, distant tsunamis, you're not going to feel the shaking. If you have something from Alaska coming, that alert's going to go through. It should. And that's a good. Did you want to add something? Or just okay. Just wanted to check. So you get an official alert. What do you do? Okay, well, are you on land or near dock? It is not recommended that you take your vessel offshore during a tsunami anytime. Please don't do that. You want to leave your vessel and head to high ground away from the coast. Depending on how much time you have, you can securely moor your vessel. But ultimately, you need to make sure you're following local emergency guidance. Harbor Master, Port Captain, Emergency Manager, we have some of those folks here today. Because what we'll be doing is during these, and I'll talk about it in the next couple slides, is at Washington State Emergency Management Division, we're hosting calls to give the information about the tsunami and what to expect to our local jurisdictions, to all the counties, major cities are listening on. And from there, and I won't talk too much about what happens here at the local level, but you want to follow that up local emergency guidance, but do not take your vessel offshore during a tsunami. There's so much uncertain aspects that can happen, especially in the inner coast here. If you're on the water, a couple of things. One, making sure you're keeping in mind the amount of time you have. Beach or dock your vessel and evacuate the high ground before the first wave is expected to arrive. If that's not possible, you'll notice these things here, same kind of things to keep in mind. But ultimately, don't go out on the water, please. Tsunami alerts. There's several different alert levels. You may have heard that maybe this is going to be changing in the next couple of years. When that does, we will share that information with everyone. But ultimately, warning and advisory. Those are based on wave height, specifically. Actually, I'll start with an information statement. So, how many of us actually get tsunami alerts right now? I see a lot of the alerts raising their hands. So, information statements, they go out all the time. I get them a couple times a week. They'll say, an earthquake has occurred off the coast of Alaska, 5.6 magnitude, and it will say, no tsunami impact is expected. Sometimes it will say, undetermined. And that's when all the emergency managers' eyebrows raise. Because we're waiting. What does that mean? But ultimately, for everyone else, a couple of things might happen. From there, if it is from the information statement, it's either to go from undetermined to yes, no impact. But it can be elevated to say a watch. So that means a tsunami is possible. Still gathering information. That watch is not, it shouldn't stay a watch terribly long. It's either going to be downgraded or it's going to be upgraded. Tsunami is possible, alert level will change once more information is known. This is where you want to be prepared to take an action, listen to, local radio, TV, the NOAA weather radios. Advisories will be had happen for the entire West Coast in January. The action is to stay out of the water and away from the shore. Strong currents and dangerous waves are expected between 1 to 3 feet, possibly. That's pretty significant when you're on your boat. And with any of these actions, you want to make sure you're heading to high ground because you're not really sure. Warning, this is get to high ground and inland immediately. Follow the evacuation signage, tsunami is imminent, 3 feet or more. Be pretty significant. So how do these alerts go out? Well, the National Tsunami Warning Center, there's two. One is the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, which is in Honolulu, Hawaii, and the National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. We only care about the ones that say NTWC. As you see all of that red on the top right, that's who's going to be alerting for that region. So if you're ever seeing a statement coming out from saying PTWC, which that's not going to be for us, but NTWC is what we're looking for. So this issues alerts for Alaska, British Columbia, Washington, all of North America. So what happens for